Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Camping is supposed to be relaxing, but sometimes it turns into something else entirely. Tonight we'll be sharing a few true horror stories from the wilderness. But before we begin, a quick reminder to give us a like, and if you've got a story of your own, we're always open to hearing it. This happened in the summer of 2021. I was 24 at the time, and just finished grad school. So when my friend Tyler suggested a short hiking trip, I said yes without much thought. He had done this trail once during college, and said it was quiet, not too far from the Tennessee-North Carolina border. We planned for 3 days, 2 nights. Just the 3 of us. Me, Tyler, and James. We arrived early and started walking, but we didn't see anyone else all morning. Then around noon, we stopped at a ridge to rest. That's when we saw him. An older man came up from a side trail. He looked mid to late 50s. He wore a green jacket, dark pants, and boots with no backpack. Just a wooden stick in one hand and a small metal canteen on his belt. He walked past without stopping, gave a short nod, and said nothing. We watched him disappear into the trees ahead. As he moved, we heard a low humming, a slow, steady tune under his breath, and it stopped when he was out of sight. At the time, we were at least 6 miles in, and there were no roads nearby. No cabins or shelters were marked on the map, and people don't usually hike that deep without gear. But we told ourselves he might be an experienced hiker, or maybe had set up camp somewhere nearby. We kept moving and reached our campsite before evening. We set up the tent, boiled food, and sat by the fire. No one mentioned the man again, but we were all thinking about him. Nothing unusual happened that night. By mid-morning, we reached the ranger outpost. It was a small wooden building near a lake. No one was inside. The door was open, and there were water pumps beside it. Tyler filled our bottles while James checked the maps posted on the wall. There were papers pinned to a bulletin board. And at the bottom corner, I saw a flyer with a black and white photo of a man. It was the same man we had seen the day before. His name was Thomas Gray, missing since November of the previous year, last seen near Pine Hollow, but still not found. James came in and stood still for a few seconds. Then Tyler joined us. No one said anything for a while. Then James said we might have mistaken the man from yesterday for someone else. We camped that night in a lower area, surrounded by thick trees. There was barely enough space to set the tent, so we didn't light a fire, and the ground was too damp. That night, I lay awake again, and suddenly I heard a slow, steady humming. Faint, just outside the tent. The same tune as before. I didn't move. The sound circled slowly, then stopped behind us. Then for a long time there was no sound, and at some point I must have fallen asleep. In the morning I asked the others about the humming sound from last night, and they said they heard it too, but didn't check outside because they were scared. We didn't talk much after that. We just packed up and got back on the trail. We walked faster than usual, stayed close together, and didn't stop to check the map or rest. It was late morning when we saw the old metal post that marked the last 5 miles of the trail. After that, the path began to slope downward, and the trees started to thin. It should have felt like a relief, but it didn't. As about an hour later, we heard something up ahead. It wasn't loud, but it was close. It was a voice, calm and steady, calling my name, then Tyler's, then James's, one after the other. It was the same voice we heard 2 days earlier on the ridge. We stopped walking, and none of us said anything. We stood still for a few seconds, then kept moving. Now the final part of the trail felt longer than it should have, but eventually, we passed the same signpost we had seen on day 1. The gravel parking area came into view, and our car was right where we left it. We reached it and dropped our packs. Tyler started the engine. As we pulled out and drove down the gravel road, I looked out the window one last time. A shiver ran down my spine when I thought I saw a shadow standing at the end of the trail. I turned to tell the others, but when I glanced back, it was gone. We didn't talk much after the trip. Everyone went back to normal life, or at least tried to. But a few weeks later, Tyler told me something had changed with James. He stopped showing up for things, stopped replying to messages. Tyler visited him once, said James looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days. He kept hearing something at night, someone calling his name from outside his apartment door. He never opened the door, but it kept happening. This happened a few years ago, when I was between jobs and had too much free time. I'd been feeling stuck and thought a solo camping trip might help clear my head. But I didn't want to go to a crowded campground, so I looked for something remote. Then one weekend, I found a small used bookstore a few blocks from my apartment. It mostly had old novels and travel books, and I ended up buying a secondhand camping guide, one of those thick ones that cover every state forest and trail. When I got home and started flipping through it, a piece of paper slipped out. I opened it and saw that it was a printed camping permit for a place called Eagle Hollow State Forest. And the issue date was from 2009, and there was a ranger's name and a stamp at the bottom that said "Access Granted." I checked online and found out it was real, but not much information came up. No current campsite booking links, just a few old trail reviews, and one blurry map from 2011. I figured maybe it was just one of those old forest zones that never became popular. I wasn't thinking about rules too much. I just wanted a few days in the woods. So I printed out the permit again and planned to go that weekend. It took nearly 6 hours to drive there, and the last 40 minutes were all trees and dirt roads. There was a wooden board near the entrance, but it had no recent notices. It just said Eagle Hollow State Forest. I kept driving until I found a narrow pull-off near the trailhead. I parked there and followed the GPS coordinates on foot. After about 20 minutes of walking, I reached the marked spot. There was a small metal post stuck in the ground with a number on it, the same number from the permit. The area was flat and open enough for a tent, but I didn't see any signs of recent campers. Still, I shrugged it off, set up my tent, boiled some water for noodles, and sat quietly until dark. There were no bugs or birds either. It felt strangely quiet, but I told myself that was normal for a deep forest like this. Until that same night, when I woke up around 3 a.m. I didn't hear anything at first, just a weird feeling that something wasn't right. Then I heard slow steps circling my tent, but they stopped after a while. I thought it might have been an animal, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I woke up late the next morning. I stayed in the tent for a bit, thinking about the footsteps I'd heard. I wasn't sure if it had really happened or if I was just imagining things. Eventually, I got up and stepped outside. Everything looked normal at first, but as I walked around, I started noticing small things that didn't feel right. like the top flap of my pack was unclipped, and I always clip it closed. Always. It wasn't a big thing though, but it was something I'd never leave open on purpose. Then I saw the small bag of trail mix I had left inside the tent near the entrance. It was now sitting just outside the tent, on the ground, still sealed. Not chewed or ripped, so not an animal. But I didn't leave it there. My flashlight, which I always keep inside the left side pocket of the tent, was missing. So I checked the bag again, but I didn't find it. So I looked all around the area, even under the tent floor and inside my boots. Nothing. It was just gone. It felt like someone had gone through my stuff during the night. But nothing was stolen. It was like someone had just looked at everything and put it back, almost exactly as it was. I tried to stay calm, but I had a sick feeling in my stomach. I didn't know if someone was messing with me, or if it was just in my head. I kept thinking about the footsteps from last night. Maybe I should have packed up and left, but it was a long drive back. So I told myself I'd stay one more night and leave first thing in the morning. Now that afternoon, I didn't wander far. I stayed close to the site, didn't take any hikes. I just sat near the tent, ate, and tried to keep my mind busy. And before it got dark, I zipped up everything carefully and put the flashlight, backup battery, and phone inside the sleeping bag with me. Then around midnight, I heard something again. Not footsteps this time, just a light tap on the side of the tent. Once, and then nothing. I didn't move when I heard the tap. I just stayed frozen inside the sleeping bag. There were no footsteps, or no whispering. Just complete silence after that sound. I didn't want to make any noise. I stayed like that for what felt like hours. Then eventually, I must have fallen asleep, and when I woke up, it was just getting light outside. The first thing I did was check my gear. The food box was still closed. My backpack was still zipped. But the flashlight that had gone missing the night before was back. It was sitting just inside the tent entrance, placed on top of my boots. That was enough for me. I started packing immediately. I stuffed everything into the bag and rolled up the tent without even folding it properly. As I walked back toward the car, I kept glancing behind me. When I reached the car, it was just as I left it, except for one thing. The permit, which I had kept folded in the glove compartment, was now on the driver's seat. I hadn't touched it since arriving. I didn't even think. I threw my bag in the back, got in, and drove out. A week later, I tried looking up Eagle Hollow again, but this time I found something I hadn't seen before. It was a scanned PDF from an old state database. A short notice about campgrounds closed in 2010 after unresolved incidents and lack of available personnel. The notice listed several areas, and Eagle Hollow was one of them. I also found a forum post from 2012. A user had asked if anyone knew why the forest was closed. One reply just said, "Too many missing persons," and they stopped investigating after 2009. That was the same year stamped on the permit I found in the book. I still don't know who walked around my tent, or who went through my gear. But I know I wasn't alone. And whoever it was, they didn't want me there. This happened 3 years ago, when I was around 24 and living alone in a small one-room apartment in the city, where I had finished college. I chose this place because my uncle lived in the same building and helped me find it at a good price. About 7 months after I moved in, I woke up one morning and saw a Facebook friend request from someone I didn't recognize. However, I noticed that he was connected to my uncle on Facebook, so I assumed he might be a neighbor or someone from the building. His profile showed that he was close to my age, and nothing looked suspicious at first glance. So I accepted the request, thinking it might be someone I had simply not noticed around yet. I didn't pay much attention to it afterward, but a few days later, he began sending me messages. In the first few, he mentioned that he lived in the same building and knew my uncle well. He talked casually about how friendly my uncle was and mentioned seeing me a few times around the building. I wasn't sure if I had ever seen him before, but I still responded out of basic politeness. I didn't want to seem rude, especially since my uncle had a good reputation there. Although I replied to his messages, I kept my responses brief and formal. But by that point, I had already begun to suspect that my uncle was trying to arrange some kind of connection between me and this individual. I was not in a relationship, and my uncle often asked personal questions about my relationship status, as if it were something he needed to monitor. Anyway, it didn't really surprise me. I had no interest in anything more, but I stayed polite as long as he didn't behave inappropriately. Since we lived in the same building, I wanted to keep things respectful and avoid any problems. What bothered me more was something that happened later. One day, my uncle came to my apartment and asked for help with something on his Facebook account. He didn't know much about technology, and since we lived in the same building, I often helped him with things like that. I logged into his Facebook account, and as soon as the page loaded, a chat window popped up in the corner. The message was from the same guy who had sent me the friend request. It stood out because it was the only message in the entire conversation, as if the rest of the chat had been deleted on purpose. The message didn't make much sense on its own. It looked like it was part of an earlier conversation, possibly continuing from something that had been said before. Now I can't recall the exact words, but the main idea was that he needed my uncle's help with something. The message ended with a laughing emoji, which made it feel casual and familiar, like they had been joking about something. But it strongly suggested that my uncle had been talking to him about me, maybe even encouraging him to reach out. Up until then, I had tried to give my uncle the benefit of the doubt, but at that moment, it felt clear that he was involved. It wasn't just a coincidence anymore. It felt planned. So I began replying to his messages less often, because I had no interest in starting any kind of relationship. I was only being polite. I never gave him any reason to think I felt the same way. After some time, his messages became less frequent, and I assumed he had lost interest. I didn't think about it again, and went on with my normal routine. Then one day, after finishing my work from home, I decided to go out and buy some groceries. But as soon as I opened my apartment door, a pack of chocolates fell to the floor. The chocolates had been carefully placed on the doorknob. At that time, there was no immediate suspicion directed toward anyone specific. The chocolates were picked up and set aside in the room without further thought. A few days later, another item appeared outside the door, a small potted plant. Unlike the first gift, this one included a message. A note was glued to the flower pot, followed by a smiling face emoji. For a young woman in her 20s, living alone, receiving anonymous gifts with a message that referred to being watched created a strong sense of fear and unease. The fact that there was no name, no clear sign of who had done it, made it more disturbing. I became